And that's loading.
I'm going to sit over here.
Okay, cool. So we are live. All right, so hello and welcome to the first writing workshop of the spring quarter. I hope I got that right, because that'd be a really bad start to the quarter if I didn't. So today we're going to just be reviewing any concepts that you guys want to brush up on or talk about from previous workshops. But first off, I guess, since we have a lot of new phases here, which is really cool, what to you guys is a game writer? What does a game writer do? If you're writing for games, what does that look like? And there are no wrong answers. Well, there might be some wrong answers, but we're not going to look at you funny for saying anything funny. So...
Script writing.
Script writing.
Game design.
Game design? To an extent, yes. Anything else that you guys think that...
The overarching story.
Overarching story. Okay, cool. I'm not writing these down, so I'm going to probably forget some of them. So keep in mind if you had an answer. Let's talk about some of these. Okay, you said game design. How does that fit in, would you say, in your mind?
I think, like, if you design a game, you're automatically a game writer, because you can't have a thing happening in a vacuum. There has to be at least some form of story.
Right.
Even if you're like a pill and you're on one plane, there's already a story there, like it's a pill on a plane.
Right, so any type of game has a story. I think that I'm inclined to agree. I spoke with, briefly, John Paquette. He was the, I think, lead writer for the Spider-Man game by Insomniac. And his perspective was very similar in that, to a certain extent, all game developers are storytellers in what we do. So, yes, technically, game writers are game designers and vice versa. Cool perspective. Are there any other things that we brought up in discussion that we want to talk about? Or what were some of the other ones? There was overarching story. That's pretty important, yeah. And script writing, right? Definitely. So if we've got some like scenes going on, if it's that type of game, or if there's some dialogue going on, definitely have some scripts and screenwriting and all that good stuff. So, and maybe you looked at the document behind me that has screenplay and stuff like that. Great. Okay. So, now that we've covered that, so do you have any questions, I guess, about like what to expect to do or how to go about doing what you want to do for any of the game projects you hope to be on as a writer? Or was that a long question? I should ask shorter questions. Do you have any questions about what you'll be doing on your teams as writers? You don't? Okay, cool. So we all know what we're expecting here.
No, not really.
Not really? Well, do you want to talk about that at all, or like?
Well, I'm new, so I have no idea how anything works. So.
Great. Are you like brand new to this club?
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love it. Okay.
Okay.
So, and you're interested in all sorts of departments, specifically writing, or just gonna try them all out?
First writing, because I'm somewhat confident that I can get into that a little.
All right, all right. Well, I should hope that you'd be confident you can get into almost anything if you wanted to, but I'm glad that you're here with writing. So, as Dane and I think maybe it was Dane, said, it can be difficult to get a story into some of these games. So, something that Anna had mentioned was how game designers are technically storytellers, right? In games writing, or it's a bit just terminology, we have narrative design, right? So ask any person and you'll probably get maybe a slightly different answer, but in my mind, narrative design is looking at a game's design in a way that you can tell a story. So if we have a platformer, narrative design might be, okay, well, we have a jump mechanic in this platformer. How can we tell a story with this jump mechanic, or why are we jumping? How can I use this jump mechanic to tell my story, right? So sometimes in these types of projects in our club, we're going to be looking from a narrative design perspective of, I want to tell a story, but how do I do that? That might be through asking your programmers to implement a dialogue system. is a dialogue system the right choice for this game project? Maybe not, but that's something that you can always experiment with, try out, see what works for you. It's something you gain over time as experience. And then there is more traditional writing as well, such as through dialogue and other things such as that. And yeah, so you'll be talking about like world building. We'll be talking about like character documents. I say we will be. I think I mean more. We have talked about these, and we can always talk about these more. These documents are always available, and the purpose of this workshop today is to have the time to talk about them as needed. But actually, really quick, since I guess we're vaguely on the topic, I do want to talk about where we're going this quarter. So today, as I mentioned, is a recap day. So if you don't know already, our writing department is has new officers, which is Megan and Jen. Next year, these two will be leading these workshops, but this quarter you'll be seeing them leading some of their own moving forward as well. So some of the workshops that we have planned this quarter include talking about flavor text and item descriptions, just sort of getting some practice with those. So that'll be more of a traditional writing type of thing. We have some really fun activities planned, building off of Ludonarrative Dissonance, which we spoke about last quarter, which we can recap if you guys want. And then we have some workshop activities planned involving world building and character. Okay, so yeah, I lied. We are talking about world building and character documents later on. And we're going to have some really fun activities about that and some dialogue practice. But other than that, we do have, you know, some leeway, some open space of what we want to do with these workshops. So, I just question to you guys here: are there any subjects that you guys are really interested in talking about? Yes.
Flavor text.
Flavor text. Well, we got a workshop for that planned, so we're good. Are there any specific parts of flavor text you want to look at? I suppose.
Not really.
Not really? Great. Yeah. Any other sort of subjects? And I know it can be a little bit, I guess, hard if you're just coming into this. It's like, well, I'm not sure what to ask about, or I'm not sure what I want to learn about. That's also completely valid. So, yeah. We can also do some things, for example, case studies. If there's a game that you think is really cool that has something that it does with its story or its writing, we can look at that. We got some spots available for that type of thing. We're gonna obviously have a lot of workshops planned for like activities. There's a couple of ideas we have floating around for some activities that might include other departments if we're lucky. We'll work on that. We can potentially have workshops where I just make you guys write, because it's always a little hard to get going into that sometimes. And stop me at any time if you have any suggestions, questions, or otherwise things that you're wondering about or want to say. I can go further into Twine, because working with that a bit more, there's some stuff that I've learned that go beyond just like basic Twine stuff that I think I could talk about. And if you don't know about what basic Twine is a program that's used for choose your own adventures, and it's really cool. Actually, I could probably show something I was working on, except not on this screen and not on stream. After workshop, perhaps. So yeah, if there's not any specific topics or subjects to talk about, that's cool. We will fill those in as we move forward. Just so we know, next week's planned workshop will actually be the flavor text one, so we're good. Unless you can't make it next week, in which case we also stream and record all these workshops. Most of these workshops. Some workshops are a little bit weird in that they probably don't translate well to streams or recordings. I feel like this one, for example, might be a little bit weird to watch as a recording, because currently on stream we have just this document floating around. So yeah, that's our current plan for next week and moving forward, a few activities we have in mind. And you're always welcome to speak to us on Discord if there are any other topics you'd like to talk about. But yeah. So, since we are on the subject of this document up here, are there any workshops that we've done in the past that you'd like to talk about more? So let's see. If you can't read it from too far away, the workshops go as follows. We have Intro to Games Writing, which might have had some notes relevant to my early discussion. Planning our stories and sort of story structure, telling you not to do branching storyline, unless you have some ideas of what you're doing. Which is That's not to say never do branching storyline, just do branching storyline with a certain amount of thought and strategy going in. Screenplay format is a formatting workshop. It's a good skill to have, especially if you like to work with dialogue. If you're looking to get like a job in writing, screenplay format is usually a good like show of skill and force. In some cases, of course. But yeah, it's good for dialogue. Environmental storytelling, which dips into a little bit of narrative design to a certain extent. Dialogue, which is always good to work on in practice. IP documents and character documents. These are formats for documentation, helping share your ideas with your teammates if you're working on building a world or writing up some characters. I have a Twine workshop, which again is the aforementioned tool that I like to use sometimes just on my own, which is sort of light on programming but helps you with some writing. In a sense. You still have to do the writing itself. We have a case study on a game called Hades, which is by Supergiant Games, and I love very much. Just, you know, if you want my opinion on a game that I've played, you can just ask me at any time. Just like, hey, have you played this game? And I'll probably say no. Or I'll say, yes, and here's what I think about it, if I have something to say about it. And then Ludonarrative Dissonance at the very bottom. Above that is just a dialogue exercise, which was a wild ride. So, if any of these things sound interesting to you, we can take a look at those. If not, I do think I want to talk about Ludonarrative Dissonance a little bit, just so you guys are familiar. And then I can talk about any other questions you guys have. So, do any of these workshops sound good to you? Or do you have any other questions? Yeah?
Screenplay writing.
Screenplay format. Okay, so is it, okay, I'll just pull it up. Okay, so this is going to open a document, and then we're going to need another document. Actually, this will be good. This will be good. That's a sample. Okay, so back when I was a freshman, my first year, my senior was Sean Reed. So these notes are largely based on his notes that he gave in a presentation on Screenplay Format back when I was just a first year. That's not that long ago. A screenwriter is someone who writes a screenplay. So a screenplay, you might have seen something like this around. Gosh, this scroll bar is not very good. So essentially, the screenplay is a written document that helps encapsulate what is going on in a scene. This will include movement, if a character is moving next to someone. This will include characters, dialogue, events that happen, sound effects to a certain extent. It can be as detailed as including like camera movements, if you so choose. In the context of movie screenwriting, resources that I've read about this type of thing have mentioned that usually that'll be up to the director, not the screenwriter. So you don't really need to worry too much about camera movement, and audio will obviously be handled by an audio person. But it is good to keep in mind. If you can go to an audio person on your team and be like, here's a scene that I want to have in the game, and I need to have a doorbell, a hammer sound, and a gunshot. That will make it probably easier for them. Johan, is that accurate, or am I? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. For those of you that don't know, Johan is an audio person and our audio officer. So. Yeah, so there is a formal screenplay format. So this will include margin spacing, line spacing, font, text conventions, and I always forget them. So you're welcome. Don't feel bad. You're welcome to look it up. Actually, I do want to mention the way that I cheat on this is there's an add-on for Google Docs called Screenplay Formatter. When you install it, it looks kind of scary because it says like it wants to access your Google Drive. It kind of has to because it's a Google Drive add-on. But that will automatically help you format it in a screenplay format. But what is the screenplay format? Well, here we go. So actually, I think I will very quickly show you. This is a sample screenplay that I wrote. So you've got some like all caps stuff. You've got like a weird header that will not make sense. I'll explain it and then it will. This type of thing right here is your description of what's happening on scene, and here is some dialogue. And yeah, so the specific parts of a given screenplay. That weird header that I was talking about, that's called the slug line, or the scene header. There are a few parts of it. So you have this int or ext, which stands for interior or exterior. It indicates if a scene is taking place inside of a room or outside, just in the wilderness. So if we go back to this sample, you'll notice it's interior. Next, what do you think is up next, just based on this sample?
Dialogue.
In the slug line? So just in here.
Oh, it's the setting.
The setting? Yeah, pretty much. Then we have the scene location. So where the scene is taking place. And then after that is the time, which is a weird detail to include, but I suppose it makes sense in some contexts. So this can just be as vague as the morning, or the evening, or if you wanted it, you could say it's high noon, or whatever time. So in the example, it's interior, video game the game lab, and it's the afternoon. Yeah, that's pretty close to now. So next up is what's called the action. So these are like your, I want to say paragraphs, but you should really probably not have whole paragraphs of this stuff. You know, just do what you gotta do to set up the scene, but don't go crazy. I don't think you need all the details, but you know, we're just talking about the formatting, not the, you can't do this, because I think that part's up to you. In any case, that's just what's going on in the scene. And then we're going to have our characters. So, weird formatting thing. The first time that a character is mentioned in the scene, their name is in all caps. So, if we go to our sample, we see Riley Park in all caps here, typing away at the computer. That's the first time that Riley Park appears in this scene, so his name is capitalized in all caps. Later on, you can just refer to him as Riley, and that will be just lowercase like normal. You can also add off-screen or voiceover. So if you aren't quite sure what that would mean, off-screen would be, for example, if someone's shouting out from the side like, "Hey, you look funny," that would be off-screen. Voiceover would be probably into your thoughts. So if you got a character on screen that the camera's looking at and they're thinking to themselves like, "Do I look funny today?" That would be voiceover. So then we have, so really quick in our sample, we're talking about this section right here, right? So we got our action, right? Our character in voiceover. And now we're going to be talking about this little bit right here, which is called the parenthetical. This will be additional directions for how the line might be delivered or what's going on. This is not the place for sound effects. There's some suggestions online that I was a little bit confused about. So it's like, for example, it's a weird thing. Like, a lot of the things that might appear in the parentheticals could appear in the action as well. So just be mindful of that. Like, for example, if I were trying to say, like, in parentheses, moving towards the person, right? The proper course of action would actually be to be in the action, say, Riley moves towards this person as they say the next line, or as they talk, and then the line. So it's a weird space. I guess if you wanted to think about it, you could probably include, say, adverbs in here, like how are they talking? Like quietly, or maybe like frustrated. If you have like a voice actor, these can be helpful to them on how they might tackle a line. Like, okay, so I'm really stressed and I need to say like, "Oh, today's just great," as opposed to, "Ah, today's just great." So that would be the type of thing for a parenthetical. And maybe if it was situational, maybe like an accent, if there were a particular accent there. Relevant to the next step, dialogue. Don't write your dialogue in the accent if you are doing an accent. Write it normally so that people can read the line and understand it. That's the important part. So the dialogue is obviously what the character is going to be saying. It's going to look like this. And yeah, that's pretty self-explanatory. We also have transitions. These can be cut to, dissolve to, fade to, just your typical transitions and stuff. These appear. I have it at the beginning and end of my scene. I don't think that there's any need for transitions in the middle. I suppose if I were to have one in the middle of a scene, it could look like Riley Park, voiceover, thinking to himself, I wonder what Wayne's up to today. And then we could have a transition, cut to someplace. And Wayne's like, oh, this is terrible. Cut back to Riley. That would be a place of a transition in the middle of a scene, for example. Which brings up a point, which is, well, when do we change scenes? That would be if you change locations or you change time, I would say. So if anything in the slug line changes, that could be a place for a change in scene. Another rule of thumb for Screenplay Format, goodbye guys, thanks for joining us, is a page of Screenplay Format approximately translates to a minute of screen time, which has, I think, pretty much held true for some of the things I've worked on. So that's all the what's in it. The important part, which is kind of important, is formatting and spacing. Here's a bunch of numbers, and again, you're not going to remember them all. I guess, if anything, it uses Courier font or Courier New. This is just the tradition. I believe it's because each letter is evenly spaced, so spacing-wise it helps. Normal-sized page, 1-inch margins, except on the left, which I believe was for if it's like a booklet, if you want to print it like that. So then each different part of the Screenplay Format has its own spacing, which is weird and hard to remember. I've listed them all out here. I would suggest referring back to this document if you want to. Or just use the tool in Google Docs that helps you with it. You can vaguely, like, if you look at a Screenplay Format, you can kind of like get the feel for where things go. There's some miscellaneous notes. Oh, here's the thing about accents. Don't write dialogue in the accents. Reading out loud helps. Dialogue should be short and to the point. People don't actually talk for paragraphs unless they're giving a workshop. Yeah. So that's what we did for the Screenplay Format, which I'm actually really glad that you brought up, because we might do something with this later. But yeah, do you have any questions about all this? Because I know that I just kind of rattled off about this very quickly. And you guys will find out that's technically not what you should do. Yes?
What's the name of the add-on?
The name of the add-on is probably called Screenplay Formatter. Hey look, Screenplay Formatter. If you launch it, it looks like this. You can set the margins and font. If you want, you can set these things. I find it a little tedious. I kind of just tab to make it look like it. Has all the things you need, which is pretty handy. It's a good tool. I believe there are other tools out there. I want to say one of them was called like Celtex or something like that.
Celtics.
Yeah.
My high school used that.
Yeah.
It wants you to pay.
Right.
But back when I was using it, you download the free version, and then they just never took it away from you.
Okay. Yeah. So there might be some weird payment options with Celtics. I believe it's like Celt, like C-E-L-T, and then big X. Could be wrong.
That's
Okay. So weird spelling. Probably a bad choice in terms of marketing.
fine. Oh my god. Sorry.
You're fine. But yeah, so this is Screenplay Format. Yeah, do you have any questions about it? No? Okay, that's fine. If you come up with any questions, stop me at any time. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so we've got a good, like, 30 minutes left of this workshop. So I do want to talk about ludonarrative dissonance. It's a tongue twister. No, it's not. And I'm really sad that Dave and Spencer couldn't join us for this part. But, well, really quick, just by the name itself, what do you guys think ludonarrative dissonance means? If you've done any like word roots stuff. Do you know what the root for Ludo is? Okay. I'm trying to think. That's because it doesn't ever come up in standard speech, to my knowledge.
I think Ludo is the name of a villain from a game, but I can't remember what game.
Huh. Interesting. Well, the Latin root for Ludo, yes.
Does it mean when the game's narrative and the game's mechanics conflict?
Yes. So, to break it down really quick, the Latin root for Ludo is games or play, and narrative, as you might infer, is the story. So ludonarrative would be the story of the game, or how playing tells a story, right? In Dissonance, so a good communication tool is Discord. Discord being the opposite of harmonious, right? So dissonance is the opposite of harmony. It's in sound potentially something that sounds bad, things that don't match together. So all in all, ludonarrative dissonance is when the gameplay and the story don't match. So I'm going to pull up this slideshow. I asked because, oh no, I guess there's no notes on it. There's an activity that we did. We'll be doing an activity with it later as well, which is why I want to bring it up. So I'm just going to quickly go through these slides. Breaking down the roots, here we are. Ludonarrative dissonance, play, story, and lack of harmony. So here's just one that I enjoy. The Uncharted series has an achievement called Ludonarrative Dissonance that you get for defeating 1,000 enemies. The game itself is a sort of action-adventure shooter, but also sort of exploration, treasure hunting. Nathan Drake is a treasure hunter, but he always managed to get in firefights. And yeah, other examples. So why it's bad, can detach from the experience, breaks immersion, can kind of undermine the story if the player, for example, is if we go to Monster Hunter, right? As the name implies, we are hunting monsters. That's the gameplay is combat, fighting these giant animals. In the story, there's a sort of large overarching theme of conservation, making sure that the ecosystem is healthy, which is a bit weird because gameplay-wise, you can just fight these things to no end. And many players will feel bad about that. There's a bit of dissonance there. The gameplay wants you to feel ha, yes, I have beaten this ferocious beast, and then it gives us cute monsters, and, well, subjectively cute, but players might not want to fight that. So what the player wants, what the gameplay is, and what the story is don't quite match up. It detracts from the experience. So how to avoid it? So communicating with designers. Communication is just, in general, a very important thing. If you're working on a character, talk about that character with your teammates. If you're working with a world and there's a specific detail that you want to have shown in the level, talk to your artists, right? Communicate. Or if you are a narrative designer, keep in mind the narrative and the design at the same time to jump together. And just sort of being mindful, understanding your writing, what you want, the story you want to tell. If I want to tell a story that's very violent or action-packed, probably don't want to put that in a game that is very slow and comfortable and leisurely, and vice versa. And of course, getting feedback. If that's sampling your writing with someone else, just seeing here's my writing, how does it sound? If it's a game, playtesting, having players play the game and see, well, did the story match up, or how are you feeling at this moment in the game, is something to be mindful of. Would we ever want it? This is a rhetorical question because I don't know. It's a bit subjective. And I guess, would we ever want ludonarrative dissonance? Would we ever want our player to feel disconnected from the gameplay and the story and have those elements not match together?
If you're trying to make a point, I guess.
Right, so if you're trying to make a point, trying to subvert something perhaps, or draw attention in a sort of meta way. I don't think I've ever tried something like this. It seems like it'd be kind of scary, but it's probably doable, yeah. Okay, you can't see it on the stream, but there are a lot of dead pixels, and I feel like I can't tell if it's better or worse with the dark thing on the screen.
Better.
Okay, great. Anyway, we did some activities with this, and we will be doing some activities with this moving forward. All right, so that's ludonarrative dissonance. And once again, we hit a checkpoint. Do you guys have any questions, comments, anything you want to talk about, anything you're curious about? Yes.
If your game has, in order to progress the game, you have to do something you and your character don't want to do, but you can't just leave it because then the game won't progress. Is that ludonarrative dissonance?
Okay, so the question is, if the player doesn't want to do something, and a character doesn't want to do something, but you need to do that something to move forward, is it ludonarrative dissonance? For some reason, the example that comes to mind would be Shadow of the Colossus, which is a boss rush game, which does have an underlying narrative going on, which I don't think that they like. They pretty explicitly talk about it, but it's a bit weird. In any case, the game is about fighting these giant colossi. So the player character is trying to defeat these giant colossi in order to resurrect someone that they care about. The player, theoretically, is following along with that, trying to revive this character, and maybe trying to feel good about, or feel cool for defeating a giant boss, which is a good experience. That being said, and I think we talked about this either in Ludonarrative Dissonance or in some other subject, the game doesn't make it feel like victorious defeating these colossi. The moments are compounded with sad music and sort of like there's no like cheering victory at the win. It's almost sad. And if you take some time and like look at these colossi, they're pretty dang cool, and they mostly seem to be minding their own business. So to a certain extent, the player might be starting to think, do I really want to fight these things? What did they do to deserve me fighting them, right? We don't really know. The game maybe doesn't tell us. So the player might choose not to. And I guess it's a weird example because I feel like in this case, it sort of is, but to the point of it makes a point. It makes the player perhaps feel something, makes them think about their actions, makes them feel a certain way. So it depends on what you as the developer, you as the writer are going for. If you didn't want that, if you wanted it to be a, congratulations, you've slayed the beast, then yeah, they kind of messed up. But if they were intentionally, and they were most likely intentionally, trying to make the player think about their actions of, I've defeated this giant thing, how am I supposed to feel about that? Then I think that worked out for him, and it wasn't necessarily dissonant.
Because in the game that I'm thinking of,
Yep.
it's like the character later on goes on to say, I didn't have a choice.
Oh, okay.
Which, like, in terms of story, I feel like they did.
Okay.
But in terms of, like, actual gameplay,
Right.
the player did not have a choice.
Okay.
If off the game would do it.
Well, okay. There might not be like a correct or incorrect answer to this. The question was like, if it doesn't pick up on the mic, a character says, "I had no choice," which story-wise they probably didn't. But since it's a game, technically you do have a choice of not playing.
My point was the opposite.
Never mind.
As a player, you don't have a choice. You have to progress the game.
Okay.
But like in the story itself, the character could have chosen not to do it.
Okay, so the player doesn't have a choice. To progress in the game, they need to make something happen. In the world, the player character technically would have a choice at that moment.
Diegetically, they
yes.
do. Non-diegetically, they do not.
There are several people in the audience, just, one person asking the question. So, let's see. I would say perhaps from a design perspective, you probably wouldn't want to try to have that happen where the player, thing about games is, to a certain extent, there is player choice. As I mentioned, the player can choose to not play, which isn't a very interesting option, but technically it's a choice. But games are cool because it's based on the interactivity of the story and the player. So, let's see. Player has to continue. They don't feel good about it. That does incite a certain emotion in the player. That can be discontentment and maybe that's unintentional, and that would probably be dissonant. I'd say it's somewhat subjective, of course. And I guess from a writing perspective, like the story, if the character had a choice, as games go structurally, presumably follows a somewhat linear story. Writing-wise, there is only one outcome, and that is what was written by the developers. So, don't know if the character had choice. It's a weird one. It's a tough one. Don't know. Does that answer your question? Because
I don't feel like there was a question to be answered.
that's fair as well. All right. Okay. Are there any other questions? Great. Okay. Okay. In that case, I have an activity to do today. This will be our sort of wrap up. I'm gonna pull up a trailer. It's a story trailer for a game that I don't think it's out. I don't know the game too well. I just kind of like found it online and it was like, hey, that looks cool. We'll do that. And I hope that I'm allowed to do it. It was called Concrete Story. Alright, so here's a story trailer for the game. Is that loud? It's fine. So we're going to watch this, and then we're going to talk about it, and then we'll do an activity with it. So, here we go. It's 3 minutes long. And if it's too loud, let me know.
Oh, what's this? Your little coloring book?
Give me that.
Hello? Whoa, you're alive? Hey, over here. You want me to do that? To paint this whole town back to life. Got it. Yes.
Come on, let's get it! Hey, don't let him get away!
Keep running, freak.
If I leave now, that darkness will just come back here. I can't let that happen.
So once again, I don't want to focus too much on the design, although that's very important, and I definitely don't want to focus on advertising. But looking at this trailer, I do want to talk about how the trailer sets up what the story behind this trailer is, just in itself, and then how it looks like the game presents its story. What is the story of this game based on this trailer, anyway? Any ideas?
Some kid finds a magical paintbrush.
Some kid finds a magical paintbrush. Great. Yes,
Painting graffiti.
there's graffiti.
And I guess it helps you.
The graffiti helped you. Okay. Any other details you want to bring up there, or just sort of seems pretty simple? Yeah, what's up?
It looks like it deals with loneliness.
Okay.
And how the protagonist copes with that.
Great. So it's about the protagonist, and they're dealing with negativity and loneliness. Yeah.
The power of imagination.
And the power of imagination. Right. So actually, I did want to. That actually brings us into the next point, which is, what are the themes of this game looking to be? Which we kind of touched upon. But if you wanted to add on to that at all, what types of themes do you think are present in the trailer, or would be potentially in the game? Because it's not out yet, so it's all speculation technically, but just based on this trailer.
Loneliness and overcoming adversity.
Okay, so loneliness and overcoming adversity. Cool, yeah. So I think overcoming adversity is a good one, but it's like, that's part of like the challenge of a lot of games too, which is not a bad thing. Yeah, what's up?
Bullying and lack of authority.
Bullying and lack of authority. Why do you say lack of authority? That's
Because I
interesting.
don't see any adults in this game.
Because there are no adults in the game or the trailer. That's fair. That's yeah, interesting. So that's what's the tone, the atmosphere? They are very different in terms of literary analysis. But we're just gonna say tone as in the feelings that you feel seeing this. Do you feel happy, scared, angry, confused?
What about the setting?
Yeah, that could be the setting. What
The
is
town is dark and dreary.
the town is dark and dreary.
So is the kid's state. He has no friends.
Mm-hmm.
The people he does know,
Mhm.
tears up his coloring book.
Mm-hmm.
Then he finds a magic paintbrush,
Mhm.
on which he can start to paint the town, help make the town look better, and also help his life be better at the
Right.
same time. So then the town is a visual reflection of how he is. The darkness comes and starts to mess with his colors and shit.
Mm-hmm.
Darkness.
Yeah.
And then he has to fight the darkness back so that he can keep his expression, his creativity, and basically what is making his life better.
Right.
And hope.
Yeah. Okay. So hopeful. That's how you would sum it up. In that it's. And we'll get
You
back.
don't have hope.
You don't have
When
hope.
You have hope. You have to fight to retain that hope.
Okay. So the conflict that you see in this trailer is the character fighting for the hope, which
Sure.
would be colorful, I
You
guess.
can say that.
Okay. What would you say?
Colorful hope.
What would you say?
What would I don't know. I thought that was a good summation.
No, it was. I liked it.
have a better one.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, good job, Raz.
Yeah, thank you. What did you have something to add?
I just wanted to mention that the mansion / castle, it looks like the paintbrush in, looks a lot more visually exciting than the town.
Okay, so we have a
So
bit of
maybe it's like a magical place that only he can find.
That's loud. Okay, so we're saying this looks like a magical place. Looks kind of like almost like an observatory to me, just large open area. So I guess let's see. I think that you mentioned setting, and you mentioned how it's very dark and dreary. How does that affect how we feel, I guess, other than dark and dreary, I suppose? That's a bad question. What are we feeling right here, I suppose? What do we see in this shot?
It's very mysterious.
Mysterious? How is it mysterious? What did they do to make it mysterious?
It's like run down, but there's like sunlight filtering through. So
Okay.
It's kind of hopeful. And there's like life with the butterflies in there.
Right, right.
So it's not like completely dead.
Yeah, so in contrast to a lot of the rest of the town, there's life in here. There's flowers, a few butterflies, it looks like. Light is coming in.
A little nature.
A little bit of nature, yeah. So that's some cool sort of thematic things that they're doing in this scene that we're looking at here. Let's see. What about these companion characters, I guess? How are we feeling about these?
Super cheerful.
Super cheerful. All right. Let's see. Yes.
This looks like the kind of game where the twist would be it was all in his head the whole time.
You think so?
Well, okay, it's not the kind of game I think it would be, but like, I don't know, the story seems like if this was made as an indie game.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay, so
That's always a twist.
the point is, it could be a twist of it was all in the kid's head all along, which is fair. It could be like that. I'm gonna go out on a personal opinion here and say, hey, that's kinda not fun when you do that. It's up to you, of course, but I would say...
Because it doesn't seem like the kids know anything about these weird creatures either.
That's fair, so...
Like, if he's the only one that can see them.
Right.
But he's the only one with the brush too.
Huh?
But he's the only one with like the magic brush too.
Yeah, but like, I feel like the magic brush is the thing that makes them come to life.
Right.
And not the thing that makes them see them. Because he paints them.
Right. There's a number of ways that we could go about this, both as someone who would be appreciating it, like a consumer, and someone who'd be developing it as a writer. If you wanted to, you could make it that it was all a dream all along. It was just in the kid's head. But the question is, why? What would you want to accomplish by doing so, right? If we wanted to tell a story of warmth and overcoming loneliness and bullies, we could have it by making friends with these creatures, imaginary or otherwise. But then if it's all a dream, where are we then, right? So things to think about, I guess, when we are creating, and I guess I'm using it things to think about while we're consuming it. I don't want it to be like that, but it could. I would say that I would hope it isn't, just because, I don't know, I like having a little bit of magic in these types of worlds, you know? Especially when it's presented as such a rundown place, and there's that line, you want me to bring life back into this whole town. I think that is certainly something that is magical and warrants magic. But of course, these are all subjective and personal opinion type things.
Also,
Yes.
I want to say, I feel like a lot of the inspiration behind the monsters comes from like Japanese folklore.
Okay,
Because
so...
a lot of these spirits,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they're spirits or not, like seem like, yeah, spirits that you see in Japanese mythology.
Really?
Like the darkness monster at the end looks
Right.
a lot like.
Let's get in Kingdom Hearts way.
Yeah, you know, actually, one of our
Darkness.
other officers was like, "Hey, it's like Kingdom Hearts and something else, cause paint and darkness." That's fair. I do like the designs of these guys. Really quick though, this is all speculative, which isn't necessarily the point of this. But is there anything that we can gain? And this is a leading question. Is there anything that we can gain by observing the fact that this dark evil creature is not 2D? It's not a painting. It is, as far as we can tell.
It's adorable.
It is adorable and also very like menacing in its presentation.
It's also not on the wall.
It's not on the walls. So again, the game's not out. This is entirely speculative, so we have no idea what that means. But as writers, what would we want that to mean? What are any implications of, I guess, this creature being?
If it's off the walls, then it feels less contained and it makes it more threatening because like all of your allies are stuck onto the walls as far as we know.
Right.
And it makes that thing, which has been kind of like freed from the walls, a lot scarier.
So if you couldn't hear it, though, I think that you can. The point was, this thing isn't contained to the walls. It's not restricted, whereas your companions and allies that have been appearing in this trailer thus far are. So we have our main character who has bullies, who might be dealing with loneliness, who comes to encounter these friends that are colorful and wonderful and fun. And then we see this scene where our player character doesn't have any of that. It's dark and scary, and there's this very real threat, assuming it's not just a dream, a very real threat that is kind of scary to look at, and there's no help for him in theory. Of course, it seems like he will be able to fight back, but this, as it is in this scene, is scary. But yeah, so some cool stuff here.
And then you can cheer it.
What was that?
What if you like to beat it? You have to paint it.
Ah.
It'll be like bright yellow and cheery, and it'll stop being evil.
So the question was, what if the mechanic is you have to paint over it, which would be pretty fun and colorful. I think that technologically, that'd be pretty cool with like visuals and stuff. On the note of visuals, I think it's something that we don't really think about or discuss too much in the context of our club projects, but having a sense of the visuals is really strong. Like, if you were to look at this game, you might think that subjectively it is a beautiful game. Like, the levels look really cool. It has a very specific art style, right? And maybe that coincides with and resonates with the game's sort of mechanics of painting, drawing, imagination, right? It might compound upon that sort of magical feeling.
I wonder if they can render it better because they have a slowed down frame rate. Because in the cutscene, it looked like they look like the animation for the Lego movie.
They were intentionally sort of slowing it down. Yeah, that might be intentional, or maybe wouldn't. Who knows? I would say it was probably intentional, like aesthetic choice to make it seem kind of slowed down frame rate sort of feel. In terms of, like, for example, the characters' mouths movement, I think is something I noticed when I was watching this. That was like, that looks kind of weird, but I'll roll with it. But yeah, yes.
I think their aesthetics kind of remind me of like those stop motion styles.
Right, Leica is the studio.
Yeah.
Really cool studio, by the way. Yeah, definitely I feel like I get some stop motion vibes from it, which I think is similar to the Lego movie, which is made to look like stop motion intentionally as well. Animation's got some fun stuff in it, things like that. Let's see. Are there any other points you guys want to bring up about this trailer? Anything that you liked or thought was weird? Or
I don't like the bullies.
You don't like the bullies?
Not as like, I don't like them for the character, which I'm sure they don't like them.
Right.
Either. But I don't like them because bullies typically don't just go up to someone like, "Hey nerd, you drawing?
Yeah.
Oh, colors, man, I hate this."
Yeah.
It's just like something that's very unrelatable and has also been done to death.
Oh, I'm sure.
Just
So
that all the opposition for the character seems much less thought out than the actual character, the hero.
Right.
And so when you have a hero though is almost always only as good as the villain they can get over.
Right.
And the bullies are dumb and they just want to mess things up, man. And happen to be his coloring book and your stupid brush.
Yes.
Because he's a better bad kid than they are, because he does graffiti.
Yes. So on the subject of the bullies,
Yeah.
Just in the trailer alone, it doesn't seem like, for example, like what is their motivation? Why the heck do they care about beating up on this this poor kid?
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe in the game itself they develop that a bit more. To the point, though, it is a good point that if there's conflict, there has to be a good reason. It can be dissonant if the player steps back and is like, hold on, what's the point of this? Why is this happening?
Yeah.
I don't know what the motivation is here. So, and then bullies, it seems like a bit of a trope, a bit of a cliche, a bit of an easy way out of why does this kid have conflict? Which isn't to say that it's a bad thing. You can work with tropes, you can work with cliches intentionally.
Oh, yeah.
I think that the concern here is just, these are your stereotypical bullies. They're jerks, and they're going to chase down our main character.
It
And
seemed like we want to tell this kind of story with this magical kid. He finds brush paints thing as well. Oh, this is a cool mechanic. What do we need to do this? Well, we could have these bullies.
Right.
You know, make him do that.
That being said, I would say the perhaps the point of this game, though, isn't so much to dwell on the bullies. It is to linger on the sense of wonder and magic of these wonderful friends on the walls, these painted fellows, and these scary, evil-looking, demon-looking guys. If they wanted to spend their time there, and that is the bulk of the game, that's okay, yeah.
I see that.
Like, it could just be like, we just need to get here to this feeling that we want the players to feel, this wonder, this excitement, not the, oh, these bullies are unrealistic because they're stereotypical. But if they wanted to, they could be more refined in doing so. If you wanted, perhaps.
Yeah, the idea of you can't be creative, that isn't like bullies ripping out your coloring book, that's hey, you got to do all your homework, you got to be on time, we want you to get a job when you're 18, and you need to be able to support yourself through college so you can inevitably get another job. That's, I guess that's just a critique on capitalism. But, maybe that's a little too much for the game, but.
Well.
And if you're saying their idea was we want to show the power of creativity this kid has, I guess if I'm in the story, I would say maybe bullies isn't the best option for that, or the way we should do bullies, it should be from a different angle.
Right. That's fair.
I feel like they're also like not good written bullies
Right.
from this trailer, because the kid doesn't have anything they could tease him about other than being the quiet kid that draws.
That's fair.
Like
yes.
if he had like an overbite or something.
Well, that'd be terrible,
At least
but
I know.
yes.
I don't have it. But, like,
She had an overbite.
Yeah.
my
That.
sister does. I mean,
Oh no, that's dreadful.
You're the bully.
I do want to say though, like just me personally, even if like the presentation and setting up of the bullies is weak, right? I feel like there's the opportunity, potentially in the game, to transition, maybe have like an underlying story of maybe eventually befriending the bullies. Like as you befriend these painted creatures, the character like just sort of gets more confident perhaps, and maybe they explore like the bullies' motivations. Maybe
They finally see the colors, like, whoa! Sorry, I've never seen colors like this before, man.
Maybe.
Too good. I can't bully anymore.
I've just been focusing way too much on like
Bullying you.
Valentine last year, and
Oh no.
These colors have really opened my eyes.
It could happen.
This isn't about LSD, by the way.
Oh no. But yeah, no, I do think though.
Colors are literally off the wall.
I do think though perhaps they could use their imagery and what they have going for them in this darkness, which is cheesy, but I appreciate a bit of cheesy dramatic stuff. Maybe involving these bullies in like, oh no, there's darkness, right? Which is in itself a cliche and a bit of a tropey sort of story arc to follow. But I think that would be, in my personal opinion, subjective. A lot of this is subjective. I would find that enjoyable, I think.
Oh.
Yes.
I'm gonna talk about another game real quick.
Okay.
Bendy and Mini Machine.
I haven't played it, but I know.
I wish
it.
the villains were just like these like dudes on the wall.
Mhm.
Because I don't know, that's what the idea that I had for it. If anyone doesn't know, it's like a tribute to animation. You're stuck in an old animation studio.
Right.
Your main villain is like an animated character, but like they made 3D models instead of. Well, I guess the technology didn't allow that, but like it would have been a lot cooler if they were not 3D models.
I see.
And they were like unique monsters that were on walls, and you couldn't approach walls or something.
Interesting.
Or like you had to run away from them, like they would grab you on the floor or something.
That'd be interesting. All right, so we're getting to the end of the workshop here. Are there any last questions, remarks, comments? Any other games that you come to mind about this, or things you want to talk about this trailer? Which I think that this video like popped up on my feed a few times, and I didn't click it, and then I was just looking for a video to talk about today, and I watched it. I was like, hey, this actually looks kind of cute to me. Like, I kind of like it.
Do you have any trope pet peeves? Like you see that trope? No.
Oh, that's a good question. So tropes that I don't like. Let's see. I think that memory loss and amnesia is frustrating to me. But not like as just like, oh, I've woken up in this world that I'm not familiar with and I have no idea who I am. I think it's more like, for example, just like if a character has grown or developed and then amnesia happens later, it's like a few steps back, right? That frustrates me. That type of thing is frustrating. I don't like that.
It was all a dream.
That also is frustrating to me because in a similar way, it takes steps back from where we've been going. If we are spending the time to set something up, if we are spending the time to develop something, it doesn't make sense to me personally to say it was all a dream, or what if we just forgot that all that happened?
Lessens the impact.
Yeah. But you know, a lot of this again is subjective. So there might be people who are really fond of a good, oh no, they've forgotten everything about this person that they loved, type of thing. You know, the thing about being writers is we get to decide what type of stories we write, and as people, we get to decide what type of stories we watch or listen to or read. So it's really up to you what you enjoy. I think, personal opinion, I like to go in the more like cheerful, optimistic direction, but I know a lot of writers do like to go a little bit dark and angsty. Not jab at them. That's all good and well and good too. But yeah, a lot of it's subjective. Well, if there aren't any other questions, we're gonna probably close it up today for the writing workshop. Next week again, we'll be doing the same time, same place, streamed as well, recorded hopefully, talking about some flavor text. Hopefully we'll be doing an activity. We didn't get to do it today. I wanted to do something, maybe like work on a screenplay format, a screenplay of this type of thing, just reverse screenplay, write it. So like look at this trailer and write out like what it was like in the screenplay format. But you know, there will be a lot of practical activities and examples in these workshops, and hopefully those will be a lot of fun. Thank you all for coming today. If there's anything you want to chat about, feel free to message us on Discord, writing channel, we have that. And yeah, I hope to see you guys around. Thank you all for coming. And stop the stream recording. And thank you for watching if you're watching digitally on stream as well, or a recording.